Single dad showed up to help a stranger at 2 a.m., the heiress who met him that night never let go. At 2:07 a.m., while most of the small town slept beneath a blanket of silence, Ethan Carter was wide awake, not by choice, but because his 3-year-old son, Noah, had spiked a fever again. Ethan had just settled the little boy back to sleep when his phone buzzed with an unknown number. He almost ignored it. But something in him, some old instinct from his volunteer firefighter days, made him pick up. A trembling voice whispered, I think my car's broken down. I'm alone on the highway. Someone said you live nearby, can you help? Ethan didn't recognize the voice. Didn't even ask how she got his number. He just said, I'm on my way. Because that's who he was, a man who showed up. The 2 a.m. encounter. 20 minutes later, Ethan pulled onto the dim highway shoulder. A sleek black car sat there, its hazard lights blinking like tiny cries for help. Standing beside it was a woman wrapped in an oversized coat, shivering under the cold night sky. She looked nothing like someone who belonged on an empty highway at 2 a.m. When she stepped into the light of his truck headlights, Ethan noticed the details, her clothes expensive, her eyes red from crying, and her hands trembling as if she'd been holding fear itself. You okay? He asked gently. She nodded, though it was obvious she wasn't. My name is Grace, she said with a breath that broke halfway. Grace Harrington. The last name rang in the air. Harrington, the wealthy dynasty that practically built half the state. Meaning she was an heiress. But Ethan didn't treat her any differently. And she seemed grateful for that. The breakdown behind the breakdown. Ethan checked her engine first. It was an easy fix, a loose battery connection. But what wasn't easy was ignoring the pain hiding behind her calm face. You running from something? He asked softly. Grace froze. Then she laughed, small, broken, and tired. I left a charity gala. Too many people pretending. Too many cameras. Too many expectations. I drove to breathe, and then my car just died on me. She wrapped her arms around herself. For the first time in years, I felt alone. And it scared me. Ethan understood loneliness. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, everyday kind that single parents knew well. So he simply said, You're not alone now. Something in that simple sentence made Grace's eyes soften, as if hearing kindness from a stranger at 2 a.m. meant more than any $1 million promise she'd ever received. A small act that changed 2 lives. When the car roared back to life, Grace surprised him. Could you stay for a minute? Ethan nodded and leaned against her car, giving her space. She stared at the horizon like the night sky was holding answers she'd never been brave enough to ask for. You didn't even ask who I was, she said finally. You didn't ask who I was either, he replied. Grace smiled for the first time that night. What are you, Ethan Carter? Just a dad trying to raise his boy right. That sentence, simple, honest, hit her harder than he expected. Because all her life, she had met people who wanted her money, her status, her name. But this stranger at 2 a.m.? He wanted nothing from her. And for Grace Harrington, that was everything. The twist, a child's impact. The next morning, after making sure Noah's fever was gone, Ethan opened his door to find Grace standing on his porch, holding a small bag of toys and fever meds. I didn't know what he'd like, she said nervously, so I brought options. Noah peeked from behind Ethan's leg. Grace knelt down, smiling gently at him. And Noah, shy, sweet Noah, ran into her arms. Ethan's breath caught. Grace looked up at him, eyes shining with something he didn't expect, gratitude, connection, hope. A relationship built on kindness. Over the next weeks, Grace showed up, sometimes with soup, sometimes with stories, sometimes just to sit on the porch and talk while Noah napped. She learned how to warm a bottle. He learned she couldn't cook to save her life. She learned how strong he had to be as a single dad. He learned how lonely someone with everything could feel. And slowly, quietly, something began to grow between them. Not rushed. Not forced. But real. The emotional climax. One evening, Grace confessed the truth. "I grew up in rooms full of people," she said softly, "but you and Noah, you're the first ones who ever made me feel at home." She took a shaky breath. "That night at 2 a.m., you didn't just fix my car. You rescued me from a life where no one truly saw me." Ethan's heart tightened. "Grace. I'm just a guy who showed up. That's exactly why I'm still here." The ending that uplifts. A year later, at the very same stretch of highway where they first met, Ethan pulled over and cut the engine. Grace looked confused. Until he took her hand. "You showed up for us," he whispered. "Maybe, stay for good?" Grace didn't hesitate. In the quiet night, with stars watching like old friends, she said the words she had been carrying for a long time. "I never let go that night, and I never will." Noah, now 4, ran between them, giggling as they lifted him into their arms. And under the soft glow of headlights, a single dad, a once-lost heiress, and a little boy formed a family built on a moment of unexpected kindness at 2 a.m., proof that sometimes the smallest act can rewrite a lifetime.